Morning.
We talked about it beforehand.
What's that? No, we didn't.
Well, with our eyes.
With our eyes.
I was just wondering if we're going to have class on Friday because Friday is Monday. Yeah, so be that as it may in the existential gestalt of our school, we will not have class on Friday.
Wednesday is our last class because Thanksgiving was a holiday, and holiday doesn't mean defer work day.
Somewhere else.
Because, like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay.
You could put that in some feedback when you become an alumni and the university continues to listen to you. They already do listen to you, a lot of students.
Oh, do they ever? They don't listen
sometimes
to us.
Don't realize the power that you've got, that you are in a very powerful position as students and then eventually as alumni.
Yeah.
And if you come from blah, blah, blah. Hey, Professor Smith, faites-tu fret? Un petit peu.
Okay, cool. Welcome. Good job. Oh, we're still looking for seasonal and obligate, are we? Okay, thanks, Merrick. And seasonally. There we go. We got it. Thanks, Danielle. Okay.
I almost put one of these in. I saw it somewhere this weekend. It was somebody's word jumble, and it was like, you are or you will experience the first three words you see in this.
Oh, yeah, one of those. Yeah.
I was like, poached? What do you mean? I'll be slightly runny when you pierce me with a fork.
There we go. Okay, cool. Okay, so today, what do we do? Oh, no! Sorry. I stopped shared. I thought, I was like, what have I done? Okay, here we go. Share.
Always share. It's a lesson we talk about a lot in our household.
Yeah, sharing is
caring. Not because we're pretty good at it, the two of us. Would you like a hug?
No. You will be good at sharing. Okay. Yeah,
we insist to our children.
We insist. Folks are still coming in, though. I don't want to get started until, because, like, today and Wednesday are going to blow your minds.
Call me the seeker.
If your minds have not already been blown in this course, then it will be this week. Okay.
I saw the word seer somewhere. Yeah, there it is. It's not even. It's like Ceeeer. And now I've got the who in my head.
Ah, okay. Okay.
That's where I am. How are you?
Where,
We should start.
We should start.
Are we recording this? Because this is important stuff. You'll want to check this later on.
Yeah, we are recording it. But you know what? What we should do before we start is figure out the topic test. Because we've got one of those coming up. When is it scheduled? Probably Friday. Let's check. Topic test number 3. If you are happy with your topic test grades on the first one and the second one, do not do it.
That's how to study for it.
Yeah, don't do it.
Be happy with your last grade.
Give yourself a break. Okay, let's just go down to the course schedule, which is where I am right now. And at the very end, it's going to be in red. Topic test.
You going to share it? Can you find it?
Thursday. Oh, it says Thursday, December 1st. Okay, cool. That's when it is. We will post a link to a asynchronous study tool. And we will have the topic test. But like I said, if you're happy, don't do it. Okay. What else? Okay, let's get started. I know what we forgot to do.
What's that?
Get started.
So far.
Okay. There are some more folks in the room now, so I'm feeling better about starting. Clear. All drawings. There we go. Cool. Welcome. So, the polar bear. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about polar bears for the next 2 classes. And all of the things that they do and all of the biology that's necessary to consider when we try to predict what might happen to the polar bears. Now, predict. Lots is already happening, right? Polar bears are already being influenced by the climate crisis. And so, you know, we can kind of pat ourselves on the back for predicting correctly because it's really just an observation. But also, lots is still yet to come. So we can talk a lot about that stuff too from like an evolutionary or generational perspective. Okay, so we're going to kind of take a look at what we know about what's going on with their physiology, with their natural history and all of that, and then we'll kind of use it to make predictions.
So polar bears are not freeze tolerant.
No, they're not freeze tolerant. Most definitively not freeze tolerant. So what we'd love for you to do is to share with us all of the adaptations that you know the polar bear has to be able to survive and thrive in the cold. And you can do that in the chat or on our screen.
See this?
Mm-hmm.
Are we doing that?
Yeah, we'll talk about that for sure.
I see some coming in the chat. I see some coming in on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a question about being able to do the topic test on Friday. 2 questions? Yeah. Okay. Let's do it. The one thing though is I have to be in a conference on Friday, which is means that my accessibility will be limited with respect to being able to answer your questions, if that's okay. But we'll do, we'll have to talk with the course coordinators. So we'll post something today about that, okay, and what the plan is to make sure that it's equitable and accessible and all of that stuff, okay? So thank you for asking, and we will get back to you.
So we've got a whole bunch of these in here. We've got round
Good.
body,
Big.
that they are big.
Small ears, short
small
tail.
Ears, short tail, fur insulation.
Good.
They're fur. Black skin, I think. Insulating layer of blubber.
Good.
Large mass to volume.
Yes.
Volume to surface area. Yep.
Yes.
Smaller limbs, large body, high metabolism.
Good. Thick fur. Good. Yep.
Round.
Round. Very round.
The most terrifying thing ever when I turned around and I saw the polar bear tumbling across the tundra at me.
Okay, and then here, thick fur, big bodies, translucent fur, black skin, lots of fat, their coat, fur. Okay, perfect. So yeah, you've got the vast majority of them for sure. Let's clear this and take a look at what our list is. Okay, so yeah, here's a polar bear, so squishy and white. Okay, so pretty. Here we go. So the thick fur has sort of several layers, right? So there's the undercoat, right? Then we see this like if you have a dog at home or something like this, you have this like nice thick fuzzy layer, and then you have the guard hairs, which are much longer. Those are the ones that you usually see. They're tougher and they're less for insulation, but more for protection against like rubbing and that kind of deal.
And you see that with many breeds of dog.
Yeah.
But not all.
Not all, no.
If we were to bring Lily up here to show you her undercoat.
She doesn't have much of an undercoat.
No, she has protective hair. She was bred for something else.
Yeah. Okay. And sorry, there's still folks coming in, and there we go. Okay, I want to make sure we don't lose
Now,
them.
some of you mentioned the black skin, and that's correct, and that's what the bottom picture
Yep.
is from the archive, is the researchers who have tiptoed up behind the bear. One would imagine it has been...
Taxidermied?
No.
Oh,
What am I thinking of?
darted?
Yeah, now I can... Yes. So it's sleeping. And
Okay.
they've opened up all of
Yep.
that thick fur to look at that dark skin, which helps absorb radiant heat, as
Yep.
some of you mentioned.
Yep, exactly.
And then 11 centimeters, like
a lot.
a lot.
That's like a nice warm winter coat of fat. And obviously you nailed the surface area to volume ratio. So that's
Yeah,
great.
and in terms of whether it's high or low, I mean, just imagine that you've put the surface area on top of the volume, and then what you're saying, I understood what you were saying by saying it's high, but you're saying that the volume is high.
Is high compared
Yeah.
to the surface area.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So let's see if we can take those things, all of the things, any of the things, and organize them a little bit, if that's okay. So we have on the right or the left-hand side some biological levels of organization, and then on the top we have some physiological timescales. So let's take dark-colored skin and put it somewhere. Where do you think it's going to go? And maybe write in the text, using the text. Merrick says there. Cellular tissue evolution. I like that one. Callum says there. Okay. Can someone write in skin color in the cellular tissue evolution? There we go. Thank you.
Tool.
Okay, that's good. Okay, cool. Let's do, what else are we going to do? Thick blubber. Thick blubber. Where's that going to go? Yeah, we're struggling a little bit, right? That's okay. That's totally fine. Okay. What if I said that the blubber layer, the thickness of it changes throughout the seasons? So in the summer, it's very thin. In the winter, it's very fat. Yeah, good. Okay, cool. I like it. Okay, so someone put thank you. Okay, and then this is totally fine. And maybe it's cellular or tissue, maybe it's organism. You could argue, different levels. That's great, but you seem to be understanding the general concept anyway. Okay, cool. Another one. What's another one? Large body size. Surface area to volume ratio is low. Good. Okay, there we go. Nice. Can someone write in body size? There, perfect. Thank you. Amazing. Okay. What if I told you that, have you guys done this already? The counter current heat exchange system in the readings? Have you done that? Nope. Megan's like, no. Okay. That's totally fine. Don't worry about it. That's really good.
We'll talk about it on Wednesday.
Will we? Do you want to?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't planning on it, but that's okay. We'll work it in because it's pretty cool. Okay. Can you think of any population level adaptations to the cold for the polar bear? And why or why not? Any population level adaptations, why or why not?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat, which is kind of great. Is going extinct an evolutionary change? So locally, yes,
Yeah.
I would say.
It's not an adaptation, though. It's very much the opposite.
Ah, that's great observation. Solitary for less competition. They don't live in
groups.
Probably because of low or, let's say, dilute food sources.
Yeah, good. So you wouldn't expect to see anything filled in this box, right? Because they don't really associate at the population level. And so you wouldn't expect there to be any adaptations to the cold at the population level. Can you think of an organism, though, that does have adaptations to the cold at the population level? Any species come to mind? Is that true? Maybe. Penguins. Yes. Yeah. Iguanas too. The saltwater iguanas from the Galapagos, they get together at night on this and they form this like huge pile. It's weird and wonderful.
And right where we're sitting, snakes.
Snakes, huge piles, right? In order to keep warm. Yeah.
Snakes.
So, yeah, wonderful. Okay, cool. That's great. Thank you.
Cool. Good observations, all.
Yep. Well done. And now.
My cat climbing into my shirt.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So let's talk about polar bears and where they are situated, because this is so freaking cool.
This is pretty cool. This is I put when you get the slides later on, you can go and take a look at some of these studies. This is one that is old now, 22. It's probably older than you, but it is one that was one of the first that was done on DNA across polar bears and brown bears or grizzly bears across the north, and it was done using small snippets of mitochondrial DNA. One of the cool things about it is about using DNA is that you're kind of obliged, if you publish it, you're obliged to make that DNA publicly accessible. So the phylogeny you see on the bottom is one that I made out of the publicly accessible DNA that Gerald, Deborah, Gerald, Martine, JC, Malcolm, Charles, Kimberly, and Scott all made publicly available 22 years ago. And one of the cool things, so we take a look and you see basically two large clades, right? Or two predominant clades. The one on the top, which is Ursus arctos, so this brown, Ursus arctos is the polar bear. Sorry, the brown bear. You know how I knew that? I put a brown bear beside it. Blah, blah, blah. So I remember what I forgot.
Just start again.
To plug in my brain. So take a look at the top clade, and you'll see that it's brown bears. And we've got some locations. So isolates, DNA isolates from Southeast mainland, Kenai, Southeast mainland, and the numbers in brackets are kind of like numbers of samples that they collected. Then we see in the bottom, in the slightly grayer text, Ursus maritimus, which we all know, including me, is the polar bear. But take a look at that last individual, Ursus arctos from Admiralty Baranov-Chikov Islands, the ABC Islands in Alaska.
A, B, C.
So immediately as they look, so phylogeography is the study of kind of phylogenetics, often species or subspecific level genetics across geography. So people here were thinking they were going to look for kind of signatures of refuge or diversification across the range of the brown bear and the polar bear. And immediately what they found was this strange occurrence. What's happened here?
Go. Okay, what's weird? What do you notice that is like, huh?
That's interesting. So Gradens, if I interpret, so you wrote spirit bear in the chat, and so the hypothesis is, I think, that you're saying is people have potentially misidentified a polar bear, that it was just a light colored brown bear. That's one, because you could see misplacement in a phylogeny because of misidentification. So something that has nothing to do with evolution, just our ability to identify things. The brown bear is in the polar bear clade. Correct. There is a brown bear in the polar bear clade. Correct. And brown bears are not monophyletic. Amazing.
Done.
Amazing.
We just stopped for the day.
No, because we got mechanisms.
It's really cool.
This is 20 years ago, 20 odd years ago, 22 years ago, many World Cups ago.
And this is a WTP moment. What the polar bear?
Yeah.
Right? No.
I just rolled my eyes. Yes, yes, and you're for sure right.
Okay, so imagine you're doing this, and you're like an evolutionary biologist, ecologist, or whatever, and you're doing these phylogenies, and all of a sudden there's a brown bear mixed in with your polar bears.
So what do you do?
We've
talked about this kind of things before, and there's kind of strategies, right? And they're nested. And one of the first ones is you go back and you're like, did I drip? Did my pipette drip? Is this a contamination? Was there a well of polar bear DNA or a tube that was right beside? And did I
Yeah.
dilute things incorrectly, and have I contaminated it?
And you can imagine how many times they reran these analyses just to be sure.
Yeah. So if it was that, we probably wouldn't show it to you here.
Right.
It wasn't. And they kept finding it. This is more mitochondrial DNA about several decades later. This is whole genome stuff and whole mitochondrial genome. So the last one is, say, 250 base pairs, really small snippet. This is 1600, so it's the whole circular mitochondria. This is showing, if you take a look at these names in here, the same thing. So we've got a black bear here as the outgroup. That's our bear around here. Then we've got this population, nice distinct population of brown bears. And then we've got brown bears and polar bears kind of mixed together. So what the what?
What the what? What the P? Okay.
So was there a strip? Yeah. So one of the cool things about this is in the kind of progression of technology at the bench in terms of how old the DNA was that you could amplify. In between the 2000 and say 20, whatever this was, 16, I think, I might imagine it's 2016, we became able or adept at amplifying older and older strands of DNA. And we talked about this a little bit with the mammoth last week and the week before. That arrow is pointing at...
Gus.
We'll call it Gus. But this is DNA that they successfully extracted from this pile of bones on Svalbard, which you've been to.
Yes.
And this is using some carbon dating. They discovered that this polar bear mandible, from which they extracted the DNA, is about 115 to 130,000 years old. So very old. And a pretty small window, really, to estimate it in there. And the wear patterns on the teeth suggested that it was an adult. And so the interesting thing, if you jump back to the slide for a second, or sorry, thank you, is that it doesn't show any real difference. It still sits. It doesn't resolve a problem to say, well, whatever we're seeing with polar bears and these brown bears from the ABC Islands, see again, those Arctos, see the code at the end, ABC, ABC. So this is still happening on ABC Island, or this is still kind of the grounding of that problem. It happened a long time ago, because the signature of it is in this old bear. And this old bear, he played 3. He was alive 113,000 years ago.
Oh, boy.
This old bear.
Okay, so
now let's look at a map.
Let's simplify things a little bit for you. So we've mentioned the ABC Islands, and we've mentioned some other places around the polar regions.
I'm just glancing at some of the solutions.
Cry. Solutions. Cry. Yes. Okay, so let's take a look. So here's our North Pole, or geographic North Pole. And here we've got some polar bears, and here, and all sorts of places. And these were the locations from which the tissues or the samples were collected. And we have our ancient one somewhere too, do we not? Yes, right here. So Svalbard. And then, of course, we have some contemporary samples that were collected. And over here are the ABC Islands. Okay.
That's quite far south. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Take a like for.
Yeah. It's substantial. I mean, it's not as far south as the Manitoba population,
but the
or
way
Northern
that
Ontario.
how north feels as you go to the west.
The other thing that I would like to draw your attention to is that Ontario has polar bears.
Yeah. James Bay, it's full of them. We hope.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, not Brampton.
Okay. But anyway, so
Brampton has football players.
So take a look. And here then is a simplification of the phylogenies that we've been showing you. So we have brown bears on the ABC Islands. We have polar bears, like a whole whack of the populations. And then we have brown bears elsewhere. Okay. So what are the implications? What are the challenges? What are the issues? What questions do you have about the fact that there are polar bears nested within a clade of brown bears? What are some things that come to mind?
Again, you can put them on the screen or put them in the chat. 2 separate Speciation events.
Ooh.
Interesting.
So we evolved brown bears twice.
And we don't have a scale bar, a time scale bar on that.
Yes,
So
that's definitely a testable hypothesis that is reasonable from the information that we've given you.
Yeah.
Well done.
So if your hypothesis was going to be supported, we would expect to see very old, like lots of time across that on the
bars.
The x-axis.
Yeah.
There. Are the ABC brown bears a new species?
Okay, good. Yep.
Yep, that's a thing that you could ask as well.
Yep.
Perhaps an event that resulted in the species of polar bear, but hasn't resulted in speciation. Polar bear evolved from a common brown bear.
Nice.
Same common ancestor that migrated north.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Think about
the source of the DNA.
Yeah, that we've talked about so far.
So we've talked about mitochondrial DNA. What do we know about mitochondria?
Powerhouse of the cell.
No.
Oh. Well, we do. We know that. We agreed on that last week. Remember
that was
the realtor?
So last week ago.
The powerhouse of the cell.
What else do we know? I'm sorry, I should have asked. Not what do we know. What else do we know about mitochondria and mitochondrial DNA?
It is inherited from the mother.
Very good. Why is it inherited from the mother? What's the mechanism?
Love. True love.
No, why? Why do we get our mitochondria from our
So think about what the mother is giving.
Female-bodied parent.
What is the father
Why?
producing?
Okay, here's why. Are we at the limit of your knowledge? It's totally fine. So here's why. Oh, no, not quite. No. Okay, so we've got nuclear DNA and we have mitochondrial DNA. And they're from two cells, right? We get them from sperm and we can get them from eggs, right? And this is kind of a very sort of, heteronormative kind of a description, and there are all sorts of delightful exceptions, but here's how that part works, right? And so eggs are beautiful and fat and full of all sorts of important information, not only the nuclear DNA, but all of the other organelles, okay, including the mitochondria. Sperm is a very efficient, pared down kind of a cell, and it really only has a nucleus and nuclear DNA. It doesn't have mitochondria. So when a sperm fertilizes an egg, it brings the nuclear DNA, but it doesn't bring any mitochondrial DNA. So we get all of our mitochondrial DNA from the female-bodied parent in a very sort of classical sexual reproduction model. Okay?
So the consequence of that, from an evolutionary, from a tree thinking perspective, we're going to ask you some questions about.
Yeah. We're going to go next?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So if this phylogeny was made using mitochondrial DNA only, not nuclear DNA. And it was. What does that mean? Okay, here, take a look. And let me see if I've got this poll question ready. Let me not. Oh, sure. Polar bear phylogeny. Look at me.
I might have some things to say.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
I'll unmute. They can still read my thoughts. If you could read my mind, it would say it on the bar below. We will unmute when the poll's done. You don't have to listen to me though.
Okay. Oh, someone had a question. Oh, okay.
Where?
Somebody wrote a question up there, but it got cut off because of the text. Ask your question.
In the
Ask
chat.
us. Ask us.
Ask us in the chat.
Okay, just a few more seconds. Yeah.
This is a good one to use.
Yeah. And 10 more seconds. 8, 7, 6, 5.
What with the counting? 10 more seconds. 8, 3, 7.
Wow. I think we're getting tired.
Me? Not at all.
We didn't get much sleep last night.
I'm as spry as I look.
Okay. Here we go. End poll. Share results.
Now, one of the things to remember with these polls is, of course, did we unmute? Is that getting the things wrong here is like the best thing.
Yeah. Best thing ever.
In fact, most of you have learned.
It's okay.
Which is great.
Which is great. So the answer is, hold on. The answer is C. And this was the distribution. The answer is D. Oh, sorry. You're right. Because we're looking for the thing that is not. Yes, you're right. The answer is D. Polar bear is actually monophyletic. It's brown bear that's paraphyletic. Okay, thank you. Okay. I get trumped up with these two sometimes. Okay. Stop sharing. So, mitochondrial DNA is maternally inherited. So this tree could be the result of hybridization between polar bears and brown bears.
That is a potential and valid interpretation of that tree.
That's right.
So we cross it out.
Yeah, it could also be a speciation event that would be very unlikely, but very rare. Polar bears could re-evolve from brown bears. Yeah. Using nuclear genes would be a good next step in studying, yes, because we talked about that it was done on mitochondrial DNA, and so looking at the nuclear DNA would be a really good next step. We said that it's actually brown bear that's paraphyletic. Polar bears may have evolved quite recently in a short period of time, and this is also true, and we'll show you why.
And so remember, we're talking several layers of the onion. You're like looking back into the interior of the onion in the evolution unit when we're talking about that. But monophyletic is a way that you can put a mitten on tips on this tree that don't exclude anything, right? And so polar bear, we can cover that. We've got that kind of all of the descendants and the most recent common ancestors of polar bears. There it is.
Yeah. It's
when we go and we stretch our mittens with a string across brown bears. We're like, oh.
We missed polar bears. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Does that be Martin's? I saw just your question here. Can you explain why brown bears are paraphyletic? Does that
answer the question?
Because we're going to keep talking about it a little bit here. We still have a black bear in this phylogeny. So the phylogeny, just like us, we're kind of spinning around. So we've had phylogenies going to the left. We've had phylogenies going to the right. We've had now phylogenies going down.
I'm stuck in the middle with you.
I applaud that.
Okay.
So when we're talking about hybridization, so the successful interbreeding between two different species with the production of fertile offspring, which is not a rare thing. I'd like to just throw that in there right now, that probably in your training as a biologist, you've been thrown up against the biological species concept that Ernst Mayr, who lived to be 100, so he was good at some things, like living, and a lot of things, quite seriously. But he postulated, and we kind of we use it. And it's like, well, so what is a species? A species is something that doesn't interbreed and produce fertile offspring. And it's like, well, but what about plants? Like nearly all plants can do this. And the thing is that so speciation is a process, right? We agree about that. And we're asking a question about membership in this species or how we would identify it at a particular point in time. If speciation is a process that starts here and goes all the way up here, so it takes a long time. If we happen to be living now, like early on in the process, and we ask the question when we use a test of species identification like hybridization, and its speciation has only has been happening for a little while, it's quite reasonable to presume that they may retain the ancestral trait of being able to interbreed, even though they look like a polar bear and they look like a grizzly bear and they do really different things. And so hybridization isn't like they're not good species. But let's take a look at how we would measure this. So we've got about 4.5 million years ago, 4 or 5 million years ago, we have a split of that branch right up at the top in between. So we've got black bears and then a lineage that's going to lead to both polar bears and brown bears. And when we're looking at the nuclear phylogeny, that's going to be in this dark and light color, the tree you see right there. Now, if we add some information to that, and we look at the orange phylogeny of the mitochondria, we see still the same. So they evolve at slightly different rates, and some of your molecular biology and some of you are curious about the world. And the mitochondria, there's less kind of correction that happens there. So often mitochondrial rates of evolution are a little bit faster, blah, blah, blah. But so that's why these nodes don't align entirely. But we see a split off to the black bears, our black bears here. We see another split that still leads to 2 lineages. And then we see another split farther down. So what's happened here? Now that orange line on the left-hand side stops.
It's a mitochondrial extinction event.
And we don't have any evidence of it. Like, it must have existed, but we don't see it in polar bears today. And we don't see it in polar bears from the jawbone on Svalbard from 130,000 years ago. What we see is potentially this. So this is brown bear mitochondria.
That's going into polar bears.
So the polar bear has all of the extant lineages that we've examined so far. And today's early. Maybe there'll be some publications later on. That would be really cool.
Could you imagine if you found the ancestral mitochondrial DNA?
Yeah, that would be awesome. So, I want to talk about toads for a second, because this story is what we found with Fowler's toads in Canada.
Did you find the ancestral?
Well, yeah, we know it. So, and Long Point has it, and everywhere else in Canada doesn't.
Amazing.
Anyway, blah, blah, blah.
Polar bears.
Polar bears are not toads. Write that down. Toads hop. If you saw a polar bear hopping, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
They leap.
They leap.
So, let me sum up. Preceding, and we're doing this based on, so how do we know this age? Well, so for one, we know based on that ancient DNA sample from the jawbone. So it's older than 130,000 years ago. We also know based on what's called a molecular clock, where we estimate a rate of evolution for certain parts of your body, for certain parts of your genome, that it would tick over, mutations would happen X% per million years, for instance. So we've estimated, and that's the tilde here, about 160,000 years ago, there was something that was very hard on being a polar bear. And for some reason, polar bears, and probably for both of them, because what's happened here is we have a male polar bear that's successfully, a female brown bear that successfully allowed a male polar bear to breed. And they produced these fertile offspring. And morphologically, they kept looking like polar bears. They kept doing polar bear things.
Yep.
And so that's kind of right now, based on the evidence we have, the resolution of this genetic conundrum about the phylogeography of and intersecting biology of polar bears and brown bears. And is this just esoteric or arcane or like academic? Unfortunately, no. Because the climate crisis is reintroducing opportunities for this with much greater, this interbreeding potentially, with much greater frequency than has happened for a long time.
So we can ask some questions about the evolution stuff. Like, are there really any polar bears today? And the answer, of course, is yes. From a conservation and protection perspective, absolutely, these are polar bears. But from a molecular perspective, they're hybrids. And it's really fun to kind of think about that and to understand where these fuzzy borders and these margins are, right? And to celebrate it too, right? Yeah. That there are fuzzy boundaries in biology that are absolutely delightful.
So the question, which phylogeny is accurate? It's like, yes. They both are. They're telling you, your stories are told by different authors. The author of one of those stories is the mitochondria.
Yeah.
That is the mitochondrial story.
Yeah.
The maternal story.
Yeah, good.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So what does this have to do with polar bears today? I mean, it's all very well and good that 130,000 years ago there was this thing that happened, or more than that,
Yeah.
sorry, there was this thing that happened, and now polar bears are these like walking hybrids. It's cool. But like, what does that have to do with what's happening today? So let's think about it in terms of what we know about polar bears. Did somebody say something funny?
Yeah, I disagree. Seeing a polar bear hop would be terrifying. Yeah, on a pogo stick, just like tracking you across the ice floes. It'd bad enough to be eaten, but to be tracked by a polar bear on a pogo stick would be horrible. You're right.
Okay.
And you're right. Fuzzy boundaries are always way more interesting. I agree
So
Yeah.
interesting and delightful, right? Okay, cool. Okay, so I don't have a poll for you for this one, but let's just stamp which of these are going to be the most important for predicting what will more immediately happen to polar bears in the context of the climate crisis. Cool. Yep. Good. Good. So, I mean, we wouldn't ever have a question like this on a topic test, right? Because the answer is all of these things are important. But certainly most immediately what matters is D, which species has the range nearest to the Arctic, right? And what will happen might depend on whether or not that species is closely related to polar bears, but it might present a sort of different type of a response, right? So there might be a competition, or there might be some kind of, that kind of deal. So what will happen really depends on who's next door, if that makes sense. And it's kind of, yeah, it's really important to understand. And so that's one of the reasons why we need to understand, the biodiversity of different habitats in different regions. Kind of imagine it like, I would imagine like a big Go board, right? And how the different species from different cells are going to be able to move across the board depends on the abiotic conditions, the biotic conditions, and the way in which those things are going to interact. It's really a question of who your neighbors are, right? So let's take a look at who's next door to the polar bears. So we have the polar bear distribution in the gray hatched lines that's up here. And then right next door are brown bears. So here's the brown bear distribution in the red hatched lines, all here, going, really far south, actually. And so we see then that there is this sort of shared border between the polar bears and the brown bears. And here's Joe Haven. Joe Haven is part of the Nunavut series of communities that lives that's in the high Arctic, now situated in Canada. And what I've seen there is this kind of it represents anyway this kind of boundary between the distribution of polar bears and the distribution of brown bears. So when you walk down the streets in Joe Haven, what you see is evidence of both brown bear and polar bear hunting. So you see the skins being laid out to dry and to cure from both of these different species in a way that I don't see it in other communities, or I haven't seen it in other communities quite yet. So you either see, evidence of polar bear hunting, or you see evidence of brown bear hunting. But Joe tends to have this shift, and in fact, they're getting more and more brown bears these days because of these changes in the availability of bears for hunting. Same as Cambridge Bay, where in Iqaluit is right here. And in fact, it's less about bears because there aren't a lot of polar bears. There isn't this sort of history or this tradition of polar bear hunting in a way that there is in Joe. But what we see there is a dramatic decline on muskox hunting that's being reluctantly picked up by moose hunting. The folks there say that they don't really enjoy moose. They don't really, they don't have an appreciation for it in a way that they really value muskox. But the muskox population and the caribou populations have been dropping off quite dramatically as a result of a parasite. And that probably has a lot to do with the climate crisis as well. So we see these faunal turnovers, and the folks that live up there are, the experts in identifying when and why and how those things are happening. Okay, so let's now understand that if the brown bear is the closest neighbor to the polar bear, what traits, what things are going to be really important to help us identify what the effects will be, what the consequences will be of this, sort of this border that they share between the two species. So we can question all sorts of things, but let's actually take a look at them. And so I'm going to put up a big scary table. And what I'd love for you to do is to take a look at the differences of all of these things and give us a stamp like in the white space so that other folks can read, or you can even just put it here maybe on the left hand side in the white space. Give us a stamp if you think that it's important to predicting what's going to happen when the range of brown bear and polar bear overlap even more as a result of the climate crisis.
Holy smokes, it's that time already.
Yeah. So like all the things, right? They seem really important. I totally get it. Okay, cool. Good. So build up sort of the reason for why their size matters or why their, whatever matters, right? All of those things. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you, just like we did before, to tell us which one is most, so you only get one stamp. Which one is most immediately relevant?
People are more cautious with their stamps now.
Most immediately relevant. Okay.
It looks like a competition between range and diet with fur and hibernation.
That's fine. Totally fine. I can see the arguments for it.
Yeah.
And it's great. So what we're going to do is talk about all of that next time.
Yeah.
But should we? Yeah.
We could.
We'll show you a little video.
And it's got David Tennant.
Yeah.
The best doctor.
The best.
Yowza.
Amazing.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we'll see you Wednesday.
Take care of yourselves.